You're about to listen to the Dr. Dahlia Show. Sassy, stimulating medical talk radio. Any medical advice Dr. Dahlia Wax gives on her show should not be substituted for an actual visit to your medical provider. And now, here's Dr. Dahlia.
We are back on the Dr. Dahlia Show. Thank you all for tuning in. 1-877 Dr. Dahlia, 1-877-DOC-DALI. So when I was in medical school, we got a lot of nutrition, but maybe not enough in the scope of things where we really need to have discussions as it pertains to nutrition with our patients on everything, for the thyroid, diabetes, heart health, cholesterol, bones, testosterone production, etc. And I remember that when I was talking to one of my attendings about, oh, yeah, you got to cut the fat, no fat. And he's like, well, no, saturated fat, you get nutrients and from your meats and not to mention your testosterone production and your, and I remember asking him, is that why men crave more meat because of their testosterone? And we had this really big conversation. I didn't understand, and I didn't know at the time how much our fat intake addressed a lot of our other sort of metabolic processes. And so I was never a fan of margarine and things like that. And so like with my kids, I would use real butter. I wouldn't use margarine. I didn't feel those were safe. And when we would look at, using unsaturated fats like plant-based and oil and like olive oil, that was always something that we recommended we use. But somehow we started to go into we need to cut the fat. Then we later learned, well, actually we need to cut the carbs. Then Atkins diet and South Beach diet came into play, but then people cut the carbs too much that they were having issues. And so we started to find out that the Mediterranean diet was one of the best diets because the Mediterranean diet focused on plants, focused on fish, lamb, complex carbohydrates, whole grains. And we looked at that going, okay, so maybe we don't have to just say, cut this, but we do things in moderation. And so, we looked at vegetarians. And then I really admire vegetarians and vegans. But interestingly, a lot of my vegetarians were overweight. And people had asked me, why aren't you a vegetarian? Why haven't you considered that? You love animals so much. I go, well, I love meat. But my vegetarian patients are not slim. So there's something that my vegetarians might be doing, but they're not. A lot of my vegetarian patients were not slim. Well, it's because they were compensating with carbs. And so there's been a lot of back and forth going, is meat bad? So RFK Jr. comes in and they say, look, okay, we got to prioritize healthy food. We got to get rid of processed food. We have to get more vegetables, whole foods, but also embrace, rather than margarine, embrace butter. Kids should be having whole milk. We don't give low-fat milk to our 1 or 2-year-olds. They need the whole milk. I mean, we're trying to, because they do need fat. Do they need sugar? Do they need sugary cereals? Do they need a lot of whole milk? No. But do they need, I would buy for my kids the 2%. But we can embrace foods in their natural form as long as they're pasteurized and things like that. I know RFK Jr. has some issues with pasteurization, but I'm not a fan of raw milk. But so RFK Jr. wants us to reduce our processed foods. They do suggest to incorporate protein. This way it gets you less hungry, fills you up, provides you your essential amino acids, as well as hormone production, include testosterone, etc. And then it makes you less likely to hopefully eat more carbs. All right. If you have a lean steak or a chicken breast or a piece of salmon, especially with the omega-3s, that could be a very healthy meal as opposed to a bowl of Lucky Charms. So they flipped the food pyramid to be less discriminatory against meat. So the American Heart Association's guidelines are in sync with a lot of what RFK Jr. said, but they want you to cut the fat. So according to the American Heart Association, they do want you to increase energy intake. They do want you to exercise. They do want you to eat plenty of roots and vegetables. Eating them in their whole form rather than juice provides much needed fiber. They're in agreement with, I know everybody's saying, oh, the American Heart Association is clashing with RFK Jr. They agree with a lot of things RFK Jr. is saying. And so do a lot of doctors. They say choose foods with whole grains rather than refined grains. Choose healthy sources of protein. Now, they suggest more plant-based, like beans, lentils, nuts, and seeds. So this is where they aren't as excited about red meat. They're the American Heart Association. I don't blame them. We have the training of we have to cut fats, especially in people with heart disease. However, with the healthy population, if they're going to be going to sugar, and I mean, if their lentil soup isn't making them full, and then they go to candy bars and other things when they actually could have just had a piece of salmon or a chicken breast, and that would have filled them up, then, what is better for the heart? But I get they don't want people having a high meat diet because I'm seeing people order 17-ounce steaks. No, I agree with the American Heart Association. That's too much meat. They say this is where they differ from RFK. They say choose sources of unsaturated fats in place of sources for saturated fat. So olive oil, canola oil, nobody's against olive oil. I think olive oil is fantastic. And I think it's a great, great source of fat. But I don't like margarine. I'd rather you use butter a little bit. I want you to take the fat, take the skin off your chicken. I don't think you should be over consuming fat, and nobody's telling you to do that. But, if you want dark meat instead of white meat, and dark meat has more fat marbled into it, I love dark meat. I think that's okay. They also want you to minimize your intake of added sugars. Again, agreeing with the current HHS guidelines. Choose food low in sodium. If alcohol is not consumed, don't start. If alcohol is consumed, limit intake because they don't want you to go through DTs. So they're actually in a lot of alignment. It's just they're more about the cut the meat. Whereas RFK Jr. is like, you could have meat in your diet. Don't overdo it. But if it keeps you full and it prevents you from eating carbs, it may help. So that's what's going on. 1-877 Doc Dolly. Dr. Dahlia here. Are you tired, burned out, gaining weight, succumbing to the daily pressures of life? Well, how's your dopamine doing? How you feel right now, how you'll feel an hour from now, and how you'll feel next week is completely reliant on your dopamine. Our daily motivation and willingness to push through challenges depends on the intricate chemical process dopamine provides. Christian Kalikas and I created Deploying Dopamine, a book that tells you what dopamine is, when it dysfunctions, and how to successfully deploy it when needed. Find Deploying Dopamine on Amazon today. Check it out.
Carl Amari here to tell you about our newest website for old-time radio lovers. It's 100radioshows.com. At this site, there are 5 old-time radio shows waiting for you to download free as our gift to you, and be sure to browse the additional 700 old-time radio shows available to you for 70% off by using the promo code RADIO at checkout. This is a limited-time offer, so log on to 100radioshows.com. That's 100radioshows.com.
Let's face it, guys, we're living in times where the truth is becoming more suppressed and censorship is increasing at an alarming rate, especially on social media platforms. It's Clyde, and I want to tell you about a safe and secure digital playground we put together just for you. It's aftermath.media. You get access to thousands of Ground Zero archives and podcasts, along with our private social media groups with your basic membership starting at only $7 a month. Each subscription includes tech support, access to the RSS feeds, along with our own chat room and Telegram channel. In addition, the premium membership includes research study groups, webinars, a document and movie library, a live video stream of Ground Zero, a monthly Zoom chat with me, and other bonus content. Be sure to check out our yearly specials as well. Sign up today while you're thinking about it. Sign up at aftermath.media. Again, that's aftermath.media.
Dr. Dolly Show. Thank you all for tuning in. 1-877 Dr. Dolly, 1-877-DOCDALI. Big thanks to Talk Media Network for making the show happen. Big thanks to Daniel, our producer, and big thanks to you all for tuning in. We really do appreciate it. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter or X at Dr. Dahlia, Facebook, The Dr. Dahlia Show, and on YouTube, click like and subscribe. So there's a conservative influencer named Isabelle Brown. And I believe that when she was at CPAC, she was talking about women, considering having kids. It's so rewarding. One of the most rewarding things somebody could do when you look back at your life, was it the paycheck you got from, an employer you had, or is it the baby and the child and the person you raised? And apparently some of her comments were just taken as she's completely evil and reckless, advocating for women to have babies. And you're looking at this and you're like, what's going on here? And the people who are mad at this 28-year-old influencer who just had a 1-year-old child, or has a 1-year-old child, encouraging, people to get married, have kids. The people that are criticizing it are actually women. And I think the majority of women on The View have kids. And so I'm a little confused where they have kids and they're upset that somebody is suggesting having kids. It's very confusing where we are. But where they are criticizing Miss Brown is apparently she had suggested to have more kids than they could afford before they think they're ready. Now, I don't know if that was a direct quote from her, but I think what she's alluding to is the same thing I went through in my mind, where I don't have the money to have a kid. I'm making $1.50 an hour, if that, in residency. My husband has huge student loans. I have student loans also, but because I worked throughout school, I had less. I had about $80,000 in student loans, whereas my husband had a couple $100,000 in student loans. I got to start my career. I'm in residency. When am I going to have time? When am I going to have money to have a kid? But, my husband said to me, there's never going to be a good time. We're never going to say the time is perfect. So either we jump in and we do it or we don't. And I'm like, I want to do it. And then I figured out when I was ovulating, and that day it was funny. Danny Gans was performing. May he rest in peace. And we got tickets to go to a show. And I'm like, I think today I'm ovulating. So as soon as we're done watching Danny Gans, we got to go home and we got to try to conceive a baby. And it worked. I got pregnant right away. I was really, really happy, really blessed. And oh my gosh, and having 2 kids, I wish I could have had more, but medically it was just, I barely was able to get through both of them with, such a, busy schedule, and doctors don't seem to have the easiest path, because we have low blood volume, and whenever there's a complication, it usually happens to one of us because, we think we're taking care of ourselves, but we're not, because we're not resting and putting our feet up and things like that. And so I after 2, I was blessed, and I didn't have more. I wish I did. But it was the best thing I ever did. And boy, did it change my perspective. I really didn't get the advice from my parents. Well, you have to have, I knew it was something I just had to do. You get married, you have kids per se, but they never talked to me about how rewarding it was, because I don't think they liked us. But I got to tell you, wow. It's the best thing I ever did. And when I talk to people who are thinking about not having kids, I tell them about what really hit home with me, where I had patients where they were older and one was in the hospital, about to go into hospice. And I asked, okay, do you want me to contact your family? Like, we have no family. It's just us. And I go, if he goes, who's going to take care of you? I don't know. I don't have anybody. And I was thinking to myself, and I told my husband, I go, man, we need to have as many kids as possible, because I don't want to be alone later. Or God forbid you alone. I want to make sure there's somebody to take care of us later. So even from a selfish standpoint, for your longevity, having kids, there's so many benefits. Not to mention, the human race will go extinct if we don't have kids. Now, I'm not saying everybody has to have kids. If you don't want to have kids, you don't have kids. If you don't want to be a parent, don't be. But if somebody is encouraging and telling people, look, it's It's not an evil thing to do. It's okay, and it's rewarding. Take it from my experience, she's saying. Now, I have a 1-year-old. It is rewarding to have a kid. Then they're allowed to express that opinion. Boy, did the women on The View go after her. And I'm like, don't some of you guys have kids? Aren't some of you married? But they were saying it was reckless because she's advocating kids in an economy when there's an unstable economy. And I remember when I was graduating college. That was in the 90s. So Bill Clinton was president. And there were people with their mortarboards on their hats. And there were 4 people where they used whiteout. And somebody had will, another person had work, another person said for food. So then the audience could see these 4 sitting together saying will work for food. And it was because we were in a pretty bad recession. And there weren't a lot of jobs. Now, I didn't notice the recession because I got into medical school and I just was in school. And by the time I got out of school, the economy was better. Then we had Bush. We had then the years leading up to then the 0809, and then came the Great Recession. And that went on through to 2015. 2016 comes, economy gets better. Then we have 2020. And so the economy is always tumultuous. It always goes up and down. And so to find the right time to have a kid is a little tricky. Now, mind you, the younger generation doesn't have what I had. All I had to do was get a trade certificate, get a degree, apply for a job, and there was a good chance I would have a job. Now these people are losing jobs. So it is a little scary, but I don't think it's reckless. I mean, we are going to have to figure out how, there were families in the Holocaust that still, gave birth. My father was born in 1942. People still, there was death coming right, on all sides. And families still found a way to give rise to one of the biggest generations now, the baby boomers. Even though the baby boomers are now considered born after 1945, many individuals who were born in the 40s consider themselves baby boomers, and I'm fine with that. So, I don't understand women attacking other women. Apparently, Miss Brown said to get off the dating apps, get off the birth control pills, say I do at the altar. She says it'll ultimately trickle down into the political policies that we will see save our country. Now, that is what I think is getting people upset. Whoopi Goldberg said years ago they used to come after women of color and accuse women of color of doing this very thing. And so, the idea that if conservatives don't have enough children, there's not going to be a conservative movement, I'm sure angers people. But if you're expressing that having kids is something that's pretty rewarding, not to mention that's what our bodies, that's kind of why we have, our bodies. That's why men have testicles and, a penis. That's why women have ovaries and a uterus and a monthly cycle. It's all about, our bodies are designed to procreate. That's what they're designed for. It doesn't mean we have to, but it's not only Miss Brown's opinion. It's also nature's opinion for us to have kids. That's why our sex drive peaks mid-cycle when we have the estrogen spike and we're ovulating. I used to call it my happy week, and I didn't realize why it was a happy week. Well, that's because that's when I was ovulating, and that's when nature wanted me to get pregnant. But I was in high school at the time, so I was like, I got to ignore that happy week. So, nature has a way, and nature will want the human race to survive. Whether it'll be with sex drive, whether it will be with, I'm not sure what will happen, as now there's such an anti, having kids move. It's all about, there's overpopulation. We need to have less kids. We need to have, fewer kids. But I got to tell you, the older individuals who are worried about who's going to take care of them, they're like, where's the kids? The taxpayers who are like, well, who's going to pay taxes when we're gone? We need to have a vibrant younger generation, but we also want to make sure they're successful. And I got to tell you, when you have a kid, you work. You're like, I want to support that kid. I mean, maybe that's what's happening. We have so many adults who are like, well, I'm in my mom's basement, so I don't have to work. I don't have to. I mean, there's so many benefits when you look at having kids. Now, I don't want you having kids and beating them. I don't want you having kids and neglecting them. I don't want you having kids and using them, to get, I don't know, alimony or whatever. I mean, we don't want that. But I'm very glad I'm a mother. And anybody who's glad that they're a mother should have every right to speak out. 1-877-DOC-DOLLY. Hi guys, Dr. Dahlia here. Addictions can sneak up on us and come in many forms. Whether it's drugs, alcohol, sex, video games, porn, or something less obvious such as food, internet, or shopping, addiction can seem innocent at first and then evolve into an insurmountable evil. In our book, Addiction Basics, Caitlin Kalikas and I dive into the common addictions and provide tips for identifying and preventing these before they sneak in and take over our lives. Addiction Basics can be found on Amazon or my website, drdahlia.com. Check it out.
Carl Amari here to tell you about our newest website for old-time radio lovers. It's 100radioshows.com. At this site, there are 5 old-time radio shows waiting for you to download free as our gift to you, and be sure to browse the additional 700 old-time radio shows available to you for 70% off by using the promo code RADIO at checkout. This is a limited-time offer, so log on to 100radioshows.com. That's 100radioshows.com.
Dr. Dahlia Show. Thank you all for tuning in. 1-877-Dr. 1-877-DOC-DALI. So this is shocking. Fleetwood Mac guitarist Lindsey Buckingham has been attacked. According to Page 6, Lindsey Buckingham was doused with an unknown substance in this attack. You know, the go your own way. That one, he was targeted by a woman when he arrived at an appointment in Santa Monica, according to Page 6, on Wednesday. And I apologize, I'm having all these pop-ups come up. And he's 76 years old. And the woman, authorities describe as a stalking suspect, threw the unknown substance at him when he entered the building where his appointment was taking place. How scary. I don't know if it was acid. We don't have a lot of information. The suspect ran away. She was reportedly identified by police, but no arrest has been made. Authorities said that he is familiar with the woman from prior incidents and that she knew where he would be after learning of his appointment. So both Santa Monica and LA police departments are investigating the incident. And we don't think he was attacked. We don't know what this substance was, but that's pretty frightening. You know, you see all these opportunities. I'm still blown away by, John Lennon just, walking down the street and somebody coming up and just, it's when I hear of these stars and these celebrities, complaining that, they never made enough money and they're struggling. And I know the average person's like, well, I'm not going to play you a violin. One of the things that we don't take into account is when you become a celebrity, and I don't think the celebrities come into, understand that either. You get stalkers. And I've had stalkers. I mean, one came to the house. It was crazy. And, I never wanted to put my kids in private school because I went to public school. Not to mention we didn't have the money for private school. When you're in radio, you don't really make, the money for that type of security. But once we had callers. I had somebody who called for 15 straight years to the show every night. It was on, we had an answer line. And because they listened to the show not live, I would hear. Now, he was nice, but 15 years every night calling to the show. Now, I appreciate that we have a fan like that, but what if there was somebody who wasn't nice. And I had people send stuff to the house, it's a little frightening. Now, I'm not even I don't even consider myself a celebrity. I'm on the radio and I'm very, very grateful, but I'm no Fleetwood Mac guitarist. But unfortunately, in Fleetwood Mac, they haven't had a hit in a while. But these stalkers, they actually will find opportunities. Even they feel like they will have increased access to you once time has passed. Now, Bill Medley from the Righteous Brothers was at the Vegas Golden Knights game on Saturday, and he was the one that was I forgot, they do this horn in the beginning, and he's in his 80s. I think he was born in 1940, so I think he's 86. And he was, he still looked good. And I was like, the Righteous Brothers are here? Bobby Hatfield passed away, I think, in 2003. But here's Bill Medley. And I'm like, well, I want to see him. And I'm thinking to myself, well, he's got to have security. And I'm sure, but I'm thinking, well, wait a second. If he lives in Vegas, there's got to be a way where I could see him and meet him and say hi. Because if they aren't currently and actively making hits, they're probably not paying for a big security team, so I could then get a chance to say hi. But you see, you could see how the thinking goes within somebody's like, well, I could actually now hurt them. And the funny thing is the average stalker doesn't necessarily want to hurt in the beginning. They just want access. They want to be buddies with you because they have built in their head a relationship with you. Your radio hosts, and I've kind of had to counsel a lot of the younger radio hosts to be very cautious of what you're saying. I love being open, and I'm very, very open on air. And I remember my husband was shocked because somebody came in to see him as a patient, and they asked him about his trip, or they asked him about his surgery, or they asked him about it, and he's like, who are you? Nice to meet you, but how do you know this? Well, Dr. Dahlia talked about it on air. So my husband's like, okay, just warn me ahead of time. So, you don't have hemorrhoids, so I'm not going to talk about hemorrhoids. He goes, yeah, somebody said that you were talking about your hemorrhoids. And okay, so I'm very open on air. But the thing is people then think they know you. And when they think they know you, and they do know you, I'm pretty much an open book. But then they feel like they've had this relationship with you. You've been out to lunch with them or to breakfast with them or to dinner with them because they know all about your kids. They know all about that my son's engaged. They know all about, what my student loans were and what I had to do in school and my relationship with my mom. And so they know more about me than some of my friends. And so they feel like, okay, I earned this relationship with you because I listened to your show. And I got to tell you, man, if you guys have been listening to my show that long, you do deserve a medal. That is hard work. I get that. But then, and I'm nice to every fan I meet, and if they want me to sign or take a selfie, I'm honored, I'm flattered by that. But you could have somebody with mental illness who takes something the wrong way. So let's say you introduce yourself. I always like to ask their name, shake their hand, get to know them. But then, if I have to go somewhere, I have to go. And what if they misinterpret that as a slight or as an insult? Well, now they might get mad. Now they might feel rebuked. Now they might feel rejected. Or, oh man, well, I'd love to see your house, or I'd love to do this. I had somebody who said, I'd love to see my house. I'm like, no, you don't, because, I got cats and dogs that pee-pee house sometimes, but thank you. But I'm like, why does he want to see my house? And so then it starts to make you a little concerned. And so, here you are, John Lennon, walking around and, thinking a fan. In fact, I think it was the person who shot him or the person who killed him was somebody he autographed, I think, a record cover for. I got to double check the story. So here you're thinking it's a fan, and it's unfortunately could be your killer. And you don't make the money to have a security detail. Security details are expensive. Security details could be $100, $200, $500, $1,000 an hour. You don't make that kind of money. Not in radio, not after you had hits in the 1960s, not after TV shows. And so you look at this and you're like, so we always tell people, I know, you want to be famous and I get it. There's like Mario Lopez. He always seems to find work. So he always seems to be making money. And that's good. And you have, or the talented Donny Osmond. Donny Osmond will always have a job because he's talented and people love Donny Osmond. But the average person, you're like, where did they go? There's these videos on Facebook where they show it's AI generated, where you see the character when they were on the TV show, and then you see what they look like now. And if they've passed, you see their older self with wings. Well, Adam Rich from Eight is Enough died a few years ago. I think it was a fentanyl overdose. And another one of the girls from Eight is Enough died. And I think that might have also been a possible overdose. And you're looking at this and you're seeing, and I see these videos all the time of these individuals where the young ones have died. Maybe they were depressed, maybe they got into drugs, maybe who knows, or you go, well, wonder where they are now. I think it was Cindy from the Brady Bunch who was working in either Laughlin, Nevada or Bullhead City at a store that I frequently went to. And I was like, I would have said hi if I knew she was there. But they're not making the money to have $1,000 an hour security detail. So it's frightening if there is somebody still stalking them from the 1970s. 1-877-Doc-Dolly.
Carl Amari here to tell you about our newest website for old-time radio lovers. It's 100radioshows.com. At this site, there are 5 old-time radio shows waiting for you to download free as our gift to you, and be sure to browse the additional 700 old-time radio shows available to you for 70% off by using the promo code RADIO at checkout. This is a limited-time offer, so log on to 100radioshows.com. That's 100radioshows.com.
Have you ever thought you'd like to buy and sell houses but didn't know how or where to get the money? My name is Ron LeGrand, and over the past 40 years, I've bought over 3,000 houses without using my money or credit, and taught thousands to do the same. Today, even in a virtual environment, we buy nice houses in nice neighborhoods using no banks, realtors, contractors, or other costly entanglements, and build huge cash flow and wealth without the hassle of tenants, all without credit and little or no money. You don't need a license or experience, and I'll show you exactly how it's done. Text FREE to 99-799, and I'll send you my free training. I promise you I'll change the way you think about real estate and open the door to a new lifestyle that doesn't involve risk or rehabs and can quickly replace your current income. Text FREE to 99-799, and let me show you how to take your life back and build cash flow and wealth from your home. That's FREE to 99-799. Again, FREE to 99-799.
As an organ donor, your story doesn't have to end. The good in you can live on. In fact, you could save up to 8 lives and restore sight and health for many more. Sign up right now online as an organ, eye, and tissue donor. You'll be happy you did. And just maybe, someone else will be happy too. Go to organdonor.gov. It saves lives. U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Health Resources and Services Administration.
We are back on the Dr. Dolly Show. Thank you all for tuning in. 1-877-DOC-DOLLY, 1-877-DOCDALI. So I've been hearing some buzz that there's going to be a strike, a general nationwide strike. It's supposed to be a grassroots sort of effort, not the first time it's been done. I don't believe it's going to get $3 billion in funding like the No Kings, but it's supposed to be where individuals are being told to not go to school and not go to work during this day of strike. So I asked, when is it? And they said it's April 5th. I'm like, you mean Easter Sunday? Yeah. See, my background in PR and marketing gets very confused I would love to be a Democratic strategist and a Republican strategist. I love political strategy. Why would you spend all this time and money having people not go to school and work, but planning it on a Sunday when they don't go to school and work? This is being reported by Newsweek. I wonder if it's an April Fool's. The only problem is I partially believe it because we saw what happened with No Kings. And I'm like, you guys could have done so much more than dancing dinosaurs and Trump balloons. I mean, don't people know how to effectively? Well, just go back and study Martin Luther King. I mean, he gave some great advice on how to do boycotts and protests. I don't understand that. Just people just really are missing the mark, and they're wasting a lot of money. I mean, $3 billion budget for No Kings. And they were protesting what's happening to illegal immigrant children. Well, then that money could have helped the illegal immigrant children. And you guys would probably get more votes. There's a lot of missteps. I wish somebody would ask me and I'd help with the strategy. So, according to Newsweek, a nationwide general strike is supposed to take place on April 5th. Organizers are calling on all Americans to come together and take part in a coordinated effort to force big change by applying large-scale economic pressure. Well, if you're boycotting things that are closed on Easter Sunday, you're losing some impact. I mean, I get maybe Wednesday on the middle of the week or a Monday. So I really wonder if this is an April Fool's joke. According to Newsweek, it isn't. They say the action is being organized under the banner of General Strike 2026, or known as Strike 26. Organizers are positioning the April 5th action as an extension of a previous nationwide strike that happened January 30th. I don't remember that. So this is supposed to be a strike to stop ICE from, according to their website, murdering and kidnapping innocent people, and to remove the entire Trump regime, and to get the Department of Justice to release all of the Epstein files, which I'm still confused about why Biden didn't. I'm confused about this whole Epstein file thing. I mean, the Bidens had it, so why didn't they want to release it? So I'm confused. But it's, the Epstein files, apparently they still aren't released. Apparently, according to the website, they say that ICE is a Newsweek white nationalism with guns. They warn that recent catastrophic events are just a dry run for what the regime has planned for the midterms, and that a general strike is the only way out without more bloodshed. So the organizers are calling for mass disruption, urging participants to not go to work or school where possible. I don't know what schools are open on Easter Sunday. Like I said, I mean, who's planning this? I mean, if you're trying to boycott schools, that you don't do spring break or Easter Sunday. I'm really confused by this. They want supporters to avoid shopping at large corporations. But if they're closed for Easter Sunday, but they want you to support locally owned and small businesses. But they're going to be also home and closed for Easter Sunday. Organizers want to redirect economic activity away from major companies and strengthen local communities. I mean, that's always nice. Like Small Business Saturday we do during Christmas time. But I'm very confused as to who's organizing this. So according to Newsweek, the General Strike 2026 movement is a decentralized grassroots campaign made up of unions, organizations, and individual participants, rather than a single centralized leadership structure. Now, the only reason why I think that's false is because if it is organized by grassroots, then there would be people who go to school in that or celebrate Easter, and somebody would say, nice idea, but April 5th is Easter Sunday. Say what? Yeah. You picked a Sunday to do this. Is that a typo? I mean, if it really was grassroots and it was really involving everybody, I'm sure somebody in the audience would be like, how do we boycott school if there's no school on Sundays? A thought. So organizers emphasize that the campaign doesn't require registration. You don't have to, they won't collect your personal data or information from participants. I'm sure somebody's taking pictures. And the website also says that the group will not publish a list of collaborating organizations. Well, because they don't want, George Soros doesn't want people to know that he got, that he was a part of it. So when you look at their website, you see ski masks, you see yelling, they say join the movement, sign your strike card. So they say they don't want personal information, but there's a strike card. They say a general strike is when working people refuse their labor until demands are met. Research shows we need 3.5% of the population, or 11 million Americans, to be successful. The strike card below tracks our progress, so we all know when it's time to strike. So listen, organizing, wanting to do peaceful protest, that's what's that's what's in our American right. But there's a lot of mixed messaging here. And I get that, the midterms, people are very, very concerned. They lost the election to Trump and there was a red wave with the last election. So now there's going to be a blue wave. And I get that. And that's what makes America great. You have checks and balances, and we have, bipartisanship, hopefully. And although lately it's been really, really divided. But this is like, we want to cause, to boycott a company that, there's ways to do that. I'm just, my concern is you have a lot of lost opportunities here. And why would they pick Easter Sunday? Did they not think they were going to have any Christians or Catholics? It's also Passover week. A lot of people are closed, and it's spring break. And so if you're really grassroots, you would have talked to people that you're representing. They say, we've voted, we've protested, and still the government refuses to meet our basic needs. While the billionaire class hoards wealth and power, our labor is our greatest strength, and when we strike together, we will win. This is according to GeneralStrikeUS.com. So listen, those people who are working, let's say you work in academia. If you work in academia, you're already under the impression that there's no work on Sunday. I'm sorry why I'm bringing this up. I really thought this was an April Fool's joke. Listen, there are ways to, I said this, the reason why our democracy is going to fail is if people don't think that the representatives are representing them. And this is on both sides, And so if you have, fought for your daughter to excel in sports, and now she's going to lose because she's up against a biological male, you're going to be looking to your legislator going, why? Okay, not cool. If there's Trenda Arago, I think there was MS-13 people that were infiltrated this whole crime network within the U.S. If you're going to tell your congressperson you want them out. So if you don't feel like you're being represented, I see why you're mad. Just organize it better. 1-877-DOC-DOLLY. Don't go away.
Can you believe, with all the recent violent protests, looting, and destruction, some areas are considering either defunding or abolishing the police? At a time when America's neighborhoods need the protection of police the most, some elected officials would rather create more chaos by playing politics. If you're sick of elected officials caving in to demands of the radical left, you're not alone. It's time we stand up and declare our support for local police. The majority of police officers are important partners in protecting our God-given rights. If you prefer freedom over chaos, then learn how you can help protect the local police that serve your community. Call today and request your free Support Your Local Police info packet. Dial 800-JBS-USA1. That's 800-JBS-USA1. Request your free Support Your Local Police info packet by calling 800-JBS-USA1 today.